They say your past defines you. That's a lie. Your past doesn't define you. It refines you. Welcome to the Mile Marker Mindset Podcast, where real stories meet real change. Hosted by Mark Keith, a voice forged by the miles and refined by the mindset. Shift your mindset. Shift your life. Let's go to work.
Hey there, I am in studio today and I've got some things on my heart I want to share with you tonight. But first, let's recall the last episode when I shared the story of a friend of mine calling out my relationship patterns. That conversation forced me to ask myself 3 questions that I now use today to help other people break their own cycles of dysfunction. And by the way, I'm Mark, and this is the Mile Marker Mindset Podcast, where we keep moving forward 1 mile marker at a time. And today, I'm walking you through those same 3 questions, but I'm going to warn you. This work is uncomfortable. These questions will reveal what's really keeping you from your next mile marker and moving forward with your life. Listen, for years, I lived in denial about my own patterns. I joked with my buddies, "Oh man, I can't wait for my next toxic relationship," or "Man, I can't wait to meet my future ex-wife." I thought it was hilarious at the time. We all joked about it. But really what I was doing, though, was programming myself for failure before any of those relationships ever really began, setting myself up for failure. In the moment, though, it was impossible to know the impact a dinner table conversation would end up having. And although neither of us remembers the exact words that were said, I do recall that we were hanging out, having a couple drinks, and I just finished explaining to him all the ways my current relationship was falling apart. All her fault, naturally, right? He listened patiently like he always did. But this time, when I was finished and I was done complaining about her and all the things she was doing, he said something about me ending up in the same kind of relationships and getting the same results. Sounds kind of familiar. Maybe it just wasn't about them. At first, I just laughed it off, thinking maybe he was joking around. That's how friends are. But when I realized he's actually being serious about me needing to look at myself, that's when it hit different. The conversation was mostly about me needing to stop messing things up and creating arguments in my relationships. Well, hate to say it, at the time, he was right about how I handle conflict. I either cause fights or I shut down when things get difficult. At least I used to. And that's when I started asking myself these 3 questions that finally changed everything about my life. It all starts with looking at yourself and that self-reflection. So here's the first question. What am I doing that's working against what I say I want? For example, I said I wanted a healthy relationship, but I kept choosing emotionally unavailable women. Every time conflict came up, instead of learning to communicate through it, I'd shut down completely. I said I wanted to grow as a person, but I wasn't reading anything, I wasn't going to therapy, wasn't putting in any real work to become a better man. I said I wanted financial stability, but I was living beyond my means constantly. After my divorce, when I got my own apartment, I was thinking I could just prove that I was independent. It'd be all good. But that feeling of walking through that empty space thinking, finally, this is it. Here, my bachelor pad. This is where I rebuild my life. I thought I had it all figured out. I was going to cook healthier but simple meals, keep my place clean, maybe even learn to enjoy my own company. I bought groceries that first week feeling so proud and independent. This was going to be different. But I only lived there about 5 months, and I had to break my lease. That didn't go well. Between the child support and the cost of rent and all my other bills, I just couldn't keep up. I was buying groceries with credit cards. Man, I remember sitting in that apartment at night, surrounded by boxes I couldn't afford to unpack properly, wondering how I'd gotten so far off track. Honestly, I felt trapped in a never-ending loop of financial juggling. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Each month brought a new round of stressful calculations, trying to stretch every dollar just a little further. It was a constant mental battle. And I remember weighing the importance of every expense, wondering if I should push off the phone bill another week, or hey, it's finally time to pay the water bill. Yay, I do laundry this week. Yeah, it wasn't fun. That anxiety, let me tell you, it was relentless, gnawing at me day and night. I often found myself just staring at the ceiling, trying to map out a plan that would never quite come together. It was exhausting, and I was losing hope that things would ever get better. I'll tell you, that delay or pay game, it is not fun, and it's definitely not sustainable. I remember I was too broke to go out, too proud to ask for help, of course. And when my kids came over, we stayed in so as to not spend a lot of money, along with not going out with whatever girlfriend I had at the time to, again, save money. And then there's a weight of my own isolation. I was constantly searching for distractions, anything to drown out the echo of my own thoughts. I tried to convince myself that I was fine, that I can handle it all on my own. But deep down, I knew I was running away from the truth that I was scared, scared of what might happen if I stopped facing everything head on. It felt like a never ending cycle, a loop of avoidance and denial. Has anybody else ever been there before? Am I speaking to anybody here? But I couldn't keep running forever. Something eventually had to give. The silence was deafening. All the noise and chaos of all my relationship drama had been covering up just how empty I felt inside. The moment I knew I had to move out, I felt like such a failure. Here I was, a grown man who couldn't handle being an adult on his own. But here's a deeper truth I had to face. I'd been stuck in the cycle of dependency since I was 19 years old. That was when my parents got their own apartment and told me I couldn't come with them. That was rough. I felt abandoned. With nowhere else to go, my girlfriend at the time, her family graciously let me move in with them, even though we'd only been dating for 6 months, pushing us to advance things along faster than maybe it should have been. That girlfriend would later become my ex wife and the mother of my daughter. And her and I were prematurely forced into a living situation I wasn't mentally, emotionally, or financially ready for, created a lasting pattern that would last me well into my adulthood, where I'd rather stay in dysfunction with someone else rather than learn to be alone. But after my divorce, I went from that failed apartment to living with the roommate where I would end up in a relationship with his then girlfriend's best friend. And while convenient for date nights and hanging out, we had two very different lifestyles that would cause consistent conflict between him and I. Meanwhile, she and I were trying to do the family thing when I had my kids because my oldest daughter and her kids are all about the same age. So basically, it was a family of six when I had my kids over versus him being a bachelor or have a girlfriend and drinking and partying because he wanted to do the whole party guy thing and have people over and play games and be up late and all this. Plus, he was a functional alcoholic at the time, and you often become like the people you associate with. So if you're around people who drink heavily, guess what you're going to do? You are going to drink heavily too, which is exactly what I did a lot. I was drinking way too much of the time. We went through a lot of beer. I drank to the point where I'd black out once in a while. Not proud of it. I'd hear some pretty funny stories that I literally couldn't recall. But I think a part of the issue is that most people get that wildness out of their system in their 20s. And remember, I moved in with that girlfriend I had of 6 months and we had our kids. So I was married with a child in my 20s. While her and I did drink a little before our daughter came, I really didn't do the whole party phase in my 20s. But I made up for it in my 30s. I was living out most people, I guess you'd say, carry out in their 20s, but really I didn't realize it at the time. I was coping with alcohol and sex to avoid the pain and needed growth. Eventually, I decided, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm tired of this. I didn't like not being in control of my faculties and not remembering what happened. Let me tell you, I also hated those hangovers. They lasted like 2 weeks and they kicked my butt every single day. And every single way of those 2 weeks, it was horrible. It made me feel consistently miserable for that entire time period when I was going through those hangovers, which you'd think would be a reminder why I need to stop drinking. until the next time it happens. And too many times people had to tell me stories what I did while I was blackout drunk. How I passed out on the couch and they had to move my head and lay me sideways so I wouldn't vomit and choke myself. Stories about things I did that seemed funny at the time, but honestly were actually terrifying when I thought about them sober and reflected on it later in life. Because honestly, how can you really trust what somebody says when you have no memory of it? They could tell you you did just about anything, and you'd have no defense, no way to verify it or deny it. I tell you, the breakthrough finally came the actual last time I drank that heavily. I don't recall if it was a blackout night or not. It's definitely hard to forget how it felt afterward. As you could likely imagine, one of the worst parts was that vulnerability, that complete loss of control over your actions and your memory. That's what finally made me stop. I realized I was choosing to check out in my own life rather than deal with my problems. And it was time to turn that around. Since I made that decision, there have been women who wanted to see me drink that way again. And I set a personal boundary and I tell them, you can want me to drink and get to that point all you want, but I'm not getting stupid drunk again. It's not happening. I never want to feel that way again. So when that roommate situation ended, I moved in with another woman, another toxic relationship with somebody I should have never been with. Like many other relationships, I overstayed that one. Should have been broken up a long time before I did. It was a cycle I just couldn't seem to break. Always finding myself in the same kind of situation, hoping for a different outcome, but really never making necessary changes to achieve that goal. Honestly, I was caught in a loop of comfort and fear of being alone. And that kept me tethered to relationships that were more harmful to me than healing. I knew deep down these choices were rooted in my own unresolved issues. Yet it was easier to blame the other person than to face my own shortcomings, of course, because who likes looking at yourself? I found myself often making excuses for staying, convincing myself that things would get better or that somehow the situation would fix itself. But reality would always catch up with me, forcing me to confront the truth that I was trying so hard to ignore. And soon after, I met a friend of the couple that I was renting a room from temporarily. She and I eventually would develop a romantic relationship, or I would eventually move in with her. Uh, yes, yes, the pattern continued. Though, in hindsight, in addition to the problems that I introduced into our relationship, much of her anger was also caused by alcohol, something that I did not want to continue long term. And I really wasn't a big drinker anymore, as I stated earlier. And so I was living in her house close to the end of our turn in a toxic relationship. And that's where my friend called me out about my patterns. When that relationship finally ended, I found a little apartment for about $475 a month, thinking if I can cut expenses and get a better paying trucking job, that would solve all my problems. I even got credit cards to boost my credit score, fully intending to pay them off responsibly. Who's done that before? I had the goal of being able to buy a house at some point, but I got caught in the cycle where you pay them off with every intention of keeping them paid off. But life happens and you have to use them again and again, back and forth until you're in real financial trouble. And when I was unemployed living with my roommate, I remember having to go to the food bank for groceries. I had to go to St. Paul to Vincent to help pay my bills multiple times, specifically my rent. I had to apply for food stamps. And while I'm grateful to God for all those services and for St. Vincent de Paul helping me pay my rent again several times when I couldn't pay it, those were very humbling experiences. Definitely grateful those services are out there for those that need it. But for me, they weren't just one time events. When you're broke, you become a regular at places you thought you'd never need. I remember walking into that food bank for the first time, seeing all the other families in the same situation, realizing this is my reality now. Having to fill out paperwork for assistance, proving how little money you have, and explaining why a grown man can't pay his own bills. Finances are actually a constant learning process because life doesn't follow your budget. Your financial picture has to adapt when curveballs come your way. Getting your finances on track comes down to three things: knowing where your money goes, setting realistic boundaries, and staying flexible enough to adjust when circumstances inevitably shift, because they do, just how it goes. So, on to question number 2. What am I telling myself to justify staying stuck? What am I telling myself to justify staying stuck? After being told it's always only my fault and never her fault in my first marriage, that is, when I went to marriage counseling, it was for the both of us by myself because that makes a lot of sense. If I could just fix myself, I can fix our marriage. And you know what that did? That made me develop the mindset of it's always her fault. That was my favorite story in all my relationships. Never my fault. Kind of rubbed off on me, which is horrible, but that's what happened. Every relationship that ended, every conflict we had, I had detailed explanations for why she was a problem and I was a victim. Clearly, nothing was my fault. That's the precedent, right? For a few of those relationships, I even tried to fix our communication with a shared spiral notebook. Thinking when I was on the road and working in the truck and she was at home, we'd write down whatever issues came up. Instead of arguing over the phone, the idea was to discuss problems when we got back together to work on our communication. But that notebook became a written punching bag back and forth. It was page after page of blame mixed with anger for both her and I. You know what wasn't on those pages? We both never actually owned our own actions. Page after page of me saying I'll change, her saying she'll change, both of us pleading for things not to end. And the thing of it is, we both knew it needed to end. It was just a matter of time. I mean, that's just how it goes. So eventually that notebook would fill up so much with that back and forth that I'd realize this just isn't working. But of course, I tell myself the relationship failed because she wouldn't communicate properly, for any other number of reasons. Not because I was avoiding my part in my responsibility and what's going on, and same for her part. So we kept trying the same approach as working harder on communication, but avoiding, at least speaking for myself, the real ongoing issue, which is, or was, my role in choosing incompatible people and shutting down emotionally when things got difficult, along with not having the tools to handle conflict properly. Took a lot of self-reflection to get there, but you got to grow. I had to grow. Remember, effort doesn't equal progress when you're both avoiding responsibility. And communication tools only work when both people use them honestly. You get out of it, but you put into it. So be honest about it. Okay? Here's what I realize now about those notebook entries. We both were so focused on trying to be right that we missed the deeper issues. I was documenting her flaws while ignoring my own patterns of emotional shutdown. She was cataloging my mistakes while avoiding her own contribution to all of our dysfunction. And again, there's no fun in dysfunction. We turned what could have been a tremendous tool for growth into ammunition for blame. All right, question number 3. What would I have to give up to get what I want? Well, I had to give up the comfort of familiar dysfunction. As messed up as my patterns were, they were familiar. They were comfortable. That's a problem. It's okay to be uncomfortable. That kind of comfort often leads to chaos. I knew how to handle the chaos and how to navigate it. Starting over, learning new ways of building a healthy relationship, that was completely foreign and terrifying to me. I had to give up playing the victim, and being the wrong party just felt easier than taking responsibility for my own choices. I had to give up the safety net of not really trying because, I mean, you can't fail if you don't actually put yourself out there, right? The hardest thing for me was giving up that cycle of dependency, though. That all started when I was younger, as we talked about earlier. Even after my divorce, I couldn't break the pattern. When the apartment situation folded on my own post divorce, I moved in with a roommate. When that situation ended, I moved in with another woman. I kept choosing over and over again to live with someone else rather than learn to be comfortable being by myself and my own problems. I had a lot to learn, a lot of room to grow. I was so afraid of being alone because being alone felt like rejection all over again. But through therapy, I began to understand that my fear of being alone was deeply rooted in the trauma of my past. I realized that I had been using relationships as a way to fill a void and also as a way to not have to face the pain and insecurity that came with solitude. Let me tell you, it was a difficult truth to confront, but acknowledging it was the first step toward healing and moving forward with my life. I learned to sit with my discomfort, to embrace the silence, and to find strength within myself. Slowly, I started to build a life where I could stand on my own 2 feet and have that confidence. That journey sure wasn't easy, but it taught me about resilience and true self reliance. Through counseling and EMDR, I learned a lot about my destructive patterns came from the feeling that I didn't feel lovable. That experience created lasting wounds that influenced every relationship after that. I didn't like people getting close. And when I did let people in, it seemed like I was got burned, which of course then created a level of distrust right off the bat. I realized that while some family members do love me in their own way, that experience of being essentially left to fend for myself when I was younger overshadowed everything else in my life and created this core belief that I wasn't lovable and I wasn't worthy of love and care and stability. And that also set me in a constant state of survival mode that would follow me through all those bad relationships to come. And those beliefs drove me to unconsciously sabotage good things that came my way and accept bad things because, frankly, I believed I didn't deserve any better treatment from life or other people. So, thereby creating a self fulfilling prophecy. Even today, while I wholeheartedly tell my amazing wife and my kids that I love them, I'll be honest, it's still weird and uncomfortable to tell extended family members the same. And when they tell me they love me, I usually respond something like, "Hey, you too," or "right back at ya," instead of "I love you too." To clarify, this has nothing to do with me loving or not loving anybody. But instead, this demonstrates how the trauma I've been through continues to show in relationships of those close to me. Here's how these issues are all connected and created what I call a perfect storm of dysfunction. When I felt unloved, I would drink to numb the pain. When I was drinking, I'd make poor financial decisions. When I was broke and stressed, I'd pick fights or shut down in relationships. And then when those same relationships failed, it confirmed my personal deep belief that I wasn't worthy of love or I wasn't lovable. So the cycle would start over and over and over. Every problem made every other problem worse. Financial chaos fed relationship problems fed drinking, drinking fed financial chaos. Can anybody relate to this? Between recognizing these patterns and actually changing them was a lot of self reflection and realizing that things needed to change and I need to work on myself if I wanted to advance my life and stop making the same mistakes over and over again, expecting a different result, which is what? Definition of insanity. A part of my faith perspective, which honestly God is in every part of my life, but the part of it in this business is that my faith perspective is how God shows you what you're doing by letting you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, hoping you'll eventually learn from them. He'll show you how. You'll learn from them or you won't. I tell you, I didn't for a long time. I kept spinning my proverbial tires until I eventually learned that. You ready? I was my biggest problem. Right here, me. I was my biggest problem. I needed to know that I could live on my own, trust myself, and be an adult before I joined my life with anybody else's. I'm just going to ruin their life too and continue the pattern I had before. I realized that timing is everything. Meeting the right person at the wrong time could mean missing out on the growth and lessons necessary to truly value them and that relationship. It's not just about finding someone who fits into your life, but being ready to embrace and nurture what you have together. This understanding has helped me appreciate the journey and the person that I have become, which allowed me to build a healthier, more fulfilling relationship. And it stands as a reminder that every step, every mistake, every lesson was leading me to this moment where I could fully appreciate the love and partnership I have now with Megan. And this is where my coaching comes in. I'm a Christian, conversational life coach with principles and NLP techniques and Christian values all woven together. My approach is conversational so as to not confuse people with terminology. Look, I just want to talk. And that's really all it has to be. We don't got to go over all that psycho jargon nonsense. Look, I've been through a lot of the same or very familiar struggles my clients might be experiencing. So, additionally, I hope they can learn from my pain and have to experience the pain themselves, but still get the benefit from someone that has walked in those same shoes. You know what? Too, and even if they haven't, I have many other tools that will act as a guide through their pain and help them process whatever life is challenging them with. It starts with self reflection. We can set goals and work on progress until we know where you currently are in life. Those three questions you just heard me work through, those are exactly the same questions that I start when coaching clients who are stuck in their own cycles. But here's what makes coaching different from just asking these questions yourself. I have specific tools that help you dig deeper when you hit resistance. My clients tell me, I don't know 20 of these questions. I have techniques to help them access what they actually do know, but might be afraid to admit to themselves, because I know I've been there. When they give me surface level answers like, Mark, I just need more motivation, I have ways to help them uncover the real barriers that lie just underneath. The NLP techniques I use help people disrupt intrusive thoughts that keep them stuck in victim mode. When someone's mind keeps replaying, I'm not good at relationships, or I always mess things up, I have specific methods to interrupt those thought patterns and replace them with more accurate, helpful thinking. The Christian principles provide the foundation for believing that change is actually possible, even when you've failed 100 times before. Believe me, I had a lot of room to grow, but you have to believe it's possible first. It's about understanding that your past mistakes don't define your future potential, but the lessons from your past can refine you on a purposeful path moving forward. Also, again, being a Christian, this may not be your beliefs. That's okay, because the lessons learned, the techniques, and the tools are all universal, which means even though I'm a Christian, you don't have to be. And when you recognize these patterns in your own life, the self sabotage under question one, the victim stories from question two, and the fear of giving up once familiar in question three, that's when personalized coaching becomes powerful. I can help you develop specific strategies for your unique situation and triggers, not just generic advice. Because here's the thing, recognizing the pattern is just the first step. Breaking it requires specific tools and accountability. This podcast helps you see the patterns, but coaching gives you the roadmap for actually changing them. If you're recognizing yourself in these stories and realizing you need help breaking your own cycles, you can reach out to me at coaching@milemarkermindset.com. Let's take a minute to jot some things down. First thing, what am I doing that's working against what I say I want? Next, what story am I telling myself to justify staying stuck? And lastly, what would I have to give up to get what I want? Write specific, detailed answers. Don't give a surface level response like, I need more motivation. Dig deeper into what you're actually doing and what you're actually telling yourself. If you want to share your biggest insight, please send it to podcast@milemarkermindset.com. Because sometimes one person's breakthrough helps others see their own patterns. Throughout my journey, I've seen God's grace and mercy show up in ways I could have never expected. Look, I'm not here to preach, but faith has been a huge part of where I am and where I was and where I'm going. There's a verse that says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." That's Galatians 6:9. Again, if faith isn't your thing, that's okay. Find what works for you. Next episode, I'll introduce something I call the pause system. It's a framework I've developed for managing your reactions when life hits hard. It's helped me stay grounded instead of flying off the handle. But you can't learn to pause until you understand what you're currently doing and why. Embrace the challenge of self-reflection. It's not always easy to look in the mirror and ask the tough questions, but let me tell you, it's a crucial step in your journey. Identify the habits, thoughts, and patterns that might be holding you back. Once you see them clearly, then you can start to dismantle them. This process is not only about self-criticism, it's also about self-discovery. With each layer you peel back, you'll gain a clearer vision of who you are and who you want to become. And remember, every small step forward is a step in the right direction. So keep moving forward here. It's one little step at a time. The work starts with honesty and raw self-reflection. The change starts with responsibility and accountability. The progress starts with goals and then action. Remember, your past doesn't define you, it refines you. Once your mind is made up about the direction your life needs to go, that's when your mindset starts to shift, and that changes everything about your life. So shift your mindset and you'll shift your life. Hey, if this episode helped you, please share it with someone who needs it. Follow @milemarkermindset on Instagram for daily motivation and episode updates, or connect with me personally @RealMarkKeith. @RealMarkKeith. Let's keep moving forward to the next mile marker together. See you next time, and God bless.
The Mile Marker Mindset podcast is for informational, inspirational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for professional or clinical advice. If you are in crisis or need immediate help, please visit milemarkermindset.com/crisis help or call 911.